Principia Theologica, Episode 3, A New Picture, A New Hope. Hi, Sol Soler here again. Now we're applying the principles of the physics of consciousness to our theological understanding of our universe, the nature of our universe and God, if God exists. A scientific approach to God and religion. So, in the previous lecture, we talked about what consciousness is, and we stated that all physical energy is consciousness. All physical energy is conscious within itself, and it takes on different forms and has different conscious experiences within itself depending on the form or configuration in question. Now, until now, scientists have been working under the assumption, and it is just an assumption, that all physical energy and particles are devoid of consciousness, have no consciousness, and then for 100 years they've been trying to work out, well, how does our consciousness switch on then? If all the energy and particles that we're made of aren't conscious, how are we conscious? Because that's all we're made of. And they've totally failed to come up with any sensible, even the beginnings of a solution to that question, because it's wrong. All energy is intrinsically conscious and can take on different forms. Okay, but this change in postulate requires a radical new conceptualization of your universe. Okay? Our physical theories are how we conceive of our universe. We're now a scientific species. We all believe in science. Not all of us believe in God, but we do all believe in science. The Pope believes in science, the Dalai Lama believes in science, Richard Dawkins very obviously believes in science. And Richard Dawkins doesn't believe in God, the Pope and the Dalai Lama do. But yeah, we all believe in science. The reason you can hear me now is because of science. Science made this phone that I'm speaking into. Science made the internet. I don't know exactly how the internet works, but I know that I can go onto YouTube and type, how does the internet work? Plenty of people will give me a scientific explanation of how the internet works, and then I could go get a job in a internet service provider and see the ins and outs of exactly how the internet functions. And I know it'll be scientific, and it will involve satellites and things like that all function by way of our scientific understanding of the universe. We are definitely a scientific species. And if we are going to continue being a spiritual species, then our spirituality needs to be scientific. Because we're definitely not going to give up science. We're not going to give up technology and our scientific understanding of the universe. We will give up God, religion, and spirituality long before we give up science. So if God, and spirituality and things are to continue, they need to be scientific. Okay. But we have our new postulate now, which is that and you can see my proof of this new postulate if you check out my lectures on the principles of the physics of consciousness. So our new postulate says that all energy is intrinsically conscious, and it always has been. So we're going to compare that now with the old picture. In the old picture, the Big Bang event happened, energy came into existence, and it was totally devoid of consciousness. Okay, so the Big Bang was not a conscious event. It was a physical event only, an energetic event, but the energy was not conscious within itself. Okay, then particles were created out of this energy, and these particles, likewise, totally devoid of consciousness. Then they could combine into atoms and molecules and cells, etc. And after billions of years, they evolve into humans and life on Earth. And somehow, at some point, consciousness switches on. And these scientists have no idea how. That's why it's considered a mystery. And you can go check their theories. They don't work. They're not good. They just don't work. Okay, so that's the old picture. And not only that, but because of Isaac Newton and his classical physics, Newtonian mechanics. Newtonian mechanics is deterministic. And what does that mean? That means that the future and the past can be totally predetermined, exactly predetermined. That we can know exactly how the universe will be 1,000,000 years from now. If we measure if we measure some system very, very accurately now, we can know exactly how it will be in the future. And the only limit on how accurately we can know its future state is how accurately we can measure its state now. So if we exactly measure the position and momenta of all the components of a physical system, if we very accurately measure them, now we can use the laws of physics to work out exactly how the system will be 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now or whatever. So this is how we landed on the moon, for example. To land on the moon, you need to know exactly where the moon's going to be when you intend to land on it. And the scientists at NASA used exclusively Newtonian mechanics to work that stuff out. Which is why, basically the biggest credit for humans landing on the moon kind of goes to Isaac Newton, because it was all his physics that allowed NASA to put Neil Armstrong on the moon. Anyway. So the conventional picture of our universe, according to modern science, is it tends to be one which is deterministic, as in there are a lot of scientists out there now who will tell you that you don't have free will. Now, every day of your life, you feel like you have free will. Like, you can get up now and start walking around if you want, or you can go and get yourself a drink. And from your perspective, it feels like you're consciously choosing to do those things freely. But there are lots of scientists now who tell you, no, that's an illusion. They're telling you, and you don't really have, and that was all predetermined since the first moment of time. Now that's not true, by the way. I can assure you that's not true. And it's also absurd. Like, it does make our life, even if it is true, it makes our life absurd, because it means that what we actually experience on a day-to-day basis is radically different from the truth, and then our existence becomes an illusion, which is a very troubling way to conceive of your own reality. To conceive of your reality as an illusion is very troubling, because then it's not reality, it's an illusion. Anyway, it's wrong. Quantum mechanics cannot be treated in a deterministic way. Quantum mechanics proves the intrinsic free will of the basic energy and particles of our universe. And you have the same, you yourself have the same intrinsic free will as well. Okay. So let's have a look at the old conventional scientific picture of the universe. Well, all the energy is non-conscious. That means the universe, the Big Bang event, and the evolution of the universe was all non-conscious. Zero conscious experience to it. That means it's dead, basically. Zero consciousness, zero life, zero feeling, zero sensation. So according to modern scientists and atheists, the universe around you, when you look up at the stars, it's all totally dead. And it's just a deterministic, predetermined machine that's just ticking over like a clock, with no feeling, no intelligence, no sensation, no conscious experience at all, just totally dead. So in the old picture, you have a human consciousness is just an anomaly, an accident. Just consciousness somehow has switched on around non-conscious energy and particles. People don't understand, scientists don't understand how that's happened. It's just an accident that's taken place. It has no higher purpose, no meaning whatsoever. And your consciousness is an anomaly within a totally dead and unconscious universe. So you were born out of a dead, unfeeling machine, basically. Clockwork machine. That's totally deterministic, and your actions, your choices are also totally deterministic. You feel like you choose what you do, but you don't. That's just an illusion, is what they are trying to convince you of. So it's this very troubling philosophical way of existing where, you're 100% of your conscious experience of life and existence is contradicted by your scientific understanding of your universe, which is very troubling. Also, life is totally purposeless in this old picture. There's no purpose to it whatsoever. Humans coming into consciousness is just an accident, a strange anomaly. The whole universe is going to die in the heat death. And once you die, you don't have a soul. You're just particles and energy. And once you die, the particles and energy disintegrate. You don't have there's no special formation within your body that survives the death of the body. It's totally purposeless, and you're going to be dead for eternity. Eternal nothingness. That's the old picture painted by science. And I know that some scientists will have different pictures themselves, but I'm just talking about that generally speaking, based on my education, I went to university and everything, studying science, and I've lived in the West in a predominantly scientific under a predominantly scientific ideology. And that was the general consensus picture. That's what Stephen Hawking wants you to believe, or Richard Dawkins wants you to believe, or Sam Harris. Very thankfully, thanks be to God, it's wrong. The universe is not deterministic. Quantum mechanics shows that the universe is not deterministic. So let's talk a little bit about determinism. Isaac Newton's mechanics is deterministic, but then you've got to remember that all physics is just a description, and it's always liable to change. Isaac Newton came up with his theory of gravity, and it works very, very well. It's very, very accurate, but it's not totally correct. There are times where it needs to be corrected. And who was it corrected by? It was corrected by Albert Einstein with his general theory of relativity. And there are discrepancies between general relativity and Newton's theory, particularly what's known as the perihelion of Mercury. Newton's theory doesn't get that right. It's just a movement of Mercury. Einstein's theory does get it right. So Newton's theory isn't perfect. Einstein's theory is more accurate. And Einstein's theory will have to be corrected as well, because Einstein's theory isn't compatible with quantum mechanics. And because our universe is fundamentally quantum mechanical, we need a quantum theory of gravity, which will someday come along, and it will be even more accurate than Einstein's theory. Okay, so first thing to realize is that physics is a description, and it's not a perfect description. Okay, like we come up with our laws, but they're not for all. These laws are all deduced just by humans. Newton was a human, Einstein was a human, and they're provisional. They're always liable to be changed and made more accurate. They're never totally accurate, and they're not for all time. They're a description, a mathematical description of the nature of our universe. And Newtonian's mathematical description of our universe was deterministic. But it only works for a particular range of phenomena. It only works for simple macroscopic objects. And it fails for microscopic objects, quantum objects, and it also fails for humans and animals. That is complex macroscopic objects. Life, in other words, what we call life. Now, according to my theory, it's all life, but then there's more complex life that, we call the animal and fauna and flora. Okay, and there Newtonian mechanics fails. You cannot analyze a human deterministically, and you also cannot analyze a quantum mechanical particle deterministically. The only region of physical phenomena that you can analyze deterministically are simple, large objects, such as balls, billiard balls, cannonballs, things like that. The moon, the earth revolving around the sun, things like that. You can use Newtonian's deterministic mechanics to analyze, but it only works for that small region of phenomena. But because it works so effectively for that small region of phenomena, scientists jumped to the conclusion, and it's a wild jump, they jumped to the conclusion that the whole universe was deterministic, and that the whole universe, everything that happens everywhere, is deterministic and predetermined and could be predetermined, even your actions right now. But you don't feel like that. You feel like you choose what you do, of course. But then quantum mechanics came along, and quantum mechanics shows that when you analyze individual particles, individual atoms, individual molecules, they are not deterministic. Okay? Then you can't say beforehand what they will choose to do. You can't predetermine their behavior at all. Okay? So the difference is between quantum mechanics and Newtonian mechanics is that in quantum mechanics you're examining the behavior of a single particle or a single atom or a single molecule. And then what you see is in different situations you see the particle having some moments of uncertainty and then choosing from a limited set of possible future states to instantiate. So if a quantum experiment has the particular physical constraints imposed on a particular particle, like a magnetic field or something, the particle, an electron say, comes into the magnetic field. After some moments of uncertainty, it chooses between spin up and spin down. And this can only be analyzed statistically. That is why quantum mechanics for 100 years is known as the probabilistic science. And the first scientists to analyze this thought, the intrinsic nature of particles is that they are intrinsically probabilistic. They just behave in this probabilistic way, and you can't predetermine them. You can just say, there's a chance it will behave this way and a chance it will behave that way. Now, of course, these scientists, it never occurred to them that what they were actually witnessing was the conscious decisions and conscious choices of the particles. Why? Because it was just too deeply ingrained into their scientific minds at the time. This is 100 years ago. It was too deeply ingrained in their minds that particles are not conscious. It was just an unthinkable, the idea of suggesting for Einstein or Niels Bohr or Schrödinger to suggest that particles are conscious was just unthinkable back then. But now the more we study the world, the universe around us, the more we see evidence of consciousness everywhere. And I've shown that the best way of interpreting quantum mechanics is that each particle is a singular center of consciousness making conscious decisions. And I encourage you to go and study that interpretation of quantum mechanics. So, yes, then in macroscopic objects, in Newtonian mechanics, you don't have a single particle. You're not studying a single particle. If you're studying a cannonball, let's say, you're studying many, many millions, billions of molecules bound together. Okay? So there's not one single molecule making decisions on behalf of the whole object. Okay? And in that case, you can apply a deterministic treatment because there's no singular molecule making the decisions for the object in question. So it just succumbs to aggregate forces. So let's give an example. Let's say you have a human on a hill, one singular human on a hill. The human can walk up the hill, walk down the hill, walk to the top of the hill, and you can't predict what he's going to do. Why? Because he has free will. He can walk down the hill, and he's halfway down the hill, and then he remembers, this is like the Grand Old Duke of York. He walks down the hill, he's halfway down the hill, and then he thinks, I left my sunglasses on top of the hill. And then he can freely choose to walk back up to the top of the hill. That's quantum mechanics, free choice. That's a macroscopic example of free will. But what if we had a bunch of humans tied together? You tie all these humans securely with rope, a group of, let's say, 50 humans. If they're at the top of the hill, 50 humans tied together, and then they start walking over the edge of the hill, or are pushed over the edge of the hill, once they start going down the hill, gravity, with the aggregate force of gravity acting on all these people, will pull them all down, and they won't be able to resist. No single human will be making the decisions of the whole bound object of humans. No singular human will be in charge of that object, and so they will all just be inevitably pulled down the side of the hill by gravity, and none of them individually will be able to resist it. So if the guy, if our man now who's tied in the object, bound to all the other humans, is like, oh, my glasses, I left my sunglasses up on the top of the hill, he can't now choose to go back up to the top of the hill. He's bound within the object, and he's going to get pulled down by gravity with the object. So that's where and we could predetermine that once the group of humans, the bound group of humans, starts falling down a hill, we could use Newtonian mechanics to calculate their rolling down the hill in a predetermined way, and we'd be able to predetermine where they'll wind up. Why is that though? It's because we don't have a singular consciousness in charge of the group. Okay? And they're bound together, and none of them can oppose the forces of all the rest of the group acting on them. No individual human is strong enough within that group to oppose all the rest. So they just fall down under the aggregate force of gravity. That's where Newtonian mechanics works. When you have a billiard ball or a cannonball, and there's a whole group of bound, conscious individuals, then you can use deterministic maths. And it works, but it doesn't work for individual conscious entities, individual particles, which is where quantum mechanics shows that individual particles actually have limited free will. So you don't have complete free will, you have free will depending on the circumstances around you. But because Newtonian mechanics was so successful, scientists made a wild jump to a very big conclusion that the whole universe is deterministic, and even human behavior is deterministic. And so they try and tell you that every choice that you make, even though you feel like you're making a free choice, they say, oh no, that was predetermined since the beginning of time. No, they're wrong. It's nonsense. It's a wild, ridiculous conclusion to jump to. It's just plainly incorrect, and the experiments of quantum mechanics prove it's incorrect. Then what about humans? Because humans are a macroscopic object, a big object, and yet we are not predetermined. Why are we not predetermined? Well, because we have a central nervous system that creates a center of consciousness within ourselves that is largely in control of the physical object. So we have one singular conscious self within ourselves that is in conscious control of the large macroscopic object that is our body. Okay, so a billiard ball or a cannonball doesn't have that. They don't have central nervous systems. They're much, much simpler configurations of conscious energy. They're just bound individual molecules bound together. Whereas after billions of years of evolution on Earth, creatures have evolved with central nervous systems that create a singular center of consciousness that is in control of the macroscopic object, that is the body. So your central nervous system creates a center of consciousness within itself that has the control of your body that you're used to. You can move your arms, move your legs, and that is all decided. Those are all decisions, conscious decisions made by made from your center of consciousness. And you do have free will. It's just limited free will. You can't do anything you want. It depends on your physical form, and it depends on the universe around you. But for example, if you're sitting down in a chair now, you can get up, you can freely choose to get up and walk around. That's a genuine free choice. Just like a quantum particle can choose to land here or land there on a screen. But you can't choose to fly. Why? Because physically, your physical configuration limits your possibilities. You're too heavy to fly. You don't have wings. A bird has a different physical configuration, including wings and much lighter bones. So a member of its set of possible future actions is flight. And so you can see how you have limited free will. You can't do anything you want. It depends on your physical configuration what you can do. But if you have a functioning body, you can get up and walk. But it also depends on the universe around you. For example, I could send men to your house to tie you to your chair. This would limit your free will. You'd still have some free will. You could still blink whenever you wanted. You could still think about whatever you want in your head. But you wouldn't be able to get up out of your chair. So I would have put constraints on you that would limit your free will. And this is equivalent in quantum mechanics to confining a particle in a potential well. You can get a particle and you can trap it somewhere. And then the particle has the free will to move around within the trap, but can't leave the potential well. That's the quantum mechanical equivalent to you being tied to your chair. We can trap particles. So there you go. Determinism is not correct. It's actually determinism that is the illusion. It is not your free will that's an illusion. The free will that you experience every day is genuine, but it's just limited. And quantum mechanics proves this. Okay. So that's great news. It means you're because if all our actions and thoughts and ideas are predetermined, it makes our lives meaningless. So it means that anything that you do that you're proud of, you have no reason to be proud of. It means that your future is totally predetermined, so nothing you do now can change your future. Whereas if you have free will, your actions and choices and behavior now can result in a better future, and that makes life meaningful. And it means that you can be proud of your actions, your choices, and your behaviors, which is how we derive a whole lot of meaning from our life. So let's compare the old picture with the new picture now. The old picture, the old scientific picture, as propounded by the likes of Stephen Hawking and Richard Dawkins and stuff, it's terrible. It's a disaster. It's about as depressing as existence can get. It's absurd just how bad this picture is from a human perspective. It's awful. It's a total tragedy and disaster. The universe is totally dead. Your existence within it is just a very short-lived accident. For 75 years, you get to be conscious if you're lucky, and then you die and you experience nothingness forever. And fine, the nothingness might be fine, as in it's nothingness, so it won't be painful, but the fact is you don't want to be nothing. You want to continue existing. So it would be much better if you had a soul, a physical soul, made of energy and particles within yourself that detaches from the body at the point of death and attaches to a new body afterwards. And this also helps us explain evolution, but I'll get into that in a later lecture. I'll explain evolution by way of reincarnation. So that's the universe is dead, you're an accident, and you're determined. None of your life, there's no purpose or meaning to your life. All your actions are predetermined and aren't really yours, and your short life is followed by an eternity of nothingness. I mean, it's literally, philosophically, existentially, it could not possibly be worse. Even if you have a happy life, what does that mean? It'd be better to have a sad life. If you have a happy life, well, then you get used to happiness. You get used to love. You get used to friendship. You get used to companionship. You get used to singing, seeing the sun every day. You get used to playing sports. You just get used to existing. You get very used to existing. And from that perspective, an eternity of non-existence is a total, complete disaster. It's the worst possible disaster. And it actually generates a whole lot of fear, and that's why the world is in the very terrible condition it's in at the moment, is because of this scientific, disastrous and depressing scientific picture of our universe. But thanks be to God, it's all totally wrong. So we look at the new picture. If we have all energy is intrinsically conscious, we have a very new picture. In the new picture, if all energy is intrinsically conscious, then instead of you living in a dead universe, you live in a universe that's alive and conscious. And it's been conscious since the beginning of time, since the Big Bang. That was a conscious event, as well as a physical event. We don't know at the moment, we don't know what that conscious event was like, or we don't know what the universe experienced within itself at that moment of the Big Bang. But the future of the physics of consciousness will help us shed light. Who knows how long that will take before we work something like that out. That's a difficult question in the physics of consciousness, but I'm sure someday it will be solved. Remember, it took 300 years for all the problems of Newtonian mechanics to be solved. It took 300 years before we could say that Newtonian mechanics was complete. So Newton provided the principles, and it took hundreds of years and many scientists to answer all the questions that could be answered with Newtonian mechanics. So in the future, we'll see many different interesting questions answered with the principles of the physics of consciousness. But anyway, The universe is conscious and alive, and all its evolution has been a conscious evolution and conscious choice made by the universe and made by different aspects and parts and subsets of the universe. So it's all been a conscious evolution. So that's part of the new picture compared to the old picture, where the old picture is dead. Old picture also, because I've got different features of the old picture and I'm comparing them to the new picture. In the old picture, we're unconnected. We have no connection to our universe. And we're not connected to it in any way. We're just an object that somehow consciousness is switched on, and that's an anomaly within a dead universe that we're not connected to. In my new picture, or in the picture I'm painting with my principles of the physics of consciousness, we are intimately connected to our universe, and we are conscious entities that have been born out of a larger conscious entity, which is the universe itself, and we are connected to that entity. And we're consciously connected to that entity. Because if you studied physics, you'll know that every physical object is a black body, which is a very poor name, given what a black body is. A black body means an object that is emitting and absorbing light all the time. All the time, your body is emitting and absorbing light. Any object that has a temperature, which is all objects have a finite temperature. So all objects are emitting and absorbing light. So there is a sense in which scientifically you do have an aura. I'm not saying people can read these auras, I'm not saying anything mystical like that, but you do just technically have a light aura. You're constantly emitting light and absorbing light from the universe around you. And since all energy is conscious, all this light is conscious as well. So you are in physical and conscious connection with your surrounding universe, and you always have been. Obviously, there are many different ways to consciously connect. I'm consciously connecting with you now by vibrating air molecules around your eardrum, which is then sending conscious electrical impulses into your brain. And if you understand English, your brain is configured through experience such that you're fluent in English and you can understand my words. That's a very important way of consciously connecting conscious physical objects connecting with one another. What else? So we're connected, the universe is alive, we're connected to it. Oh yeah, there's one important point as well. You're made of energy and I'm made of energy. And all this energy, all the energy that forms your body and all the energy that forms my body, all existed at t=0. That is at the Big Bang event, when the universe first exploded into existence. All the energy that forms your body was present at that first moment. And it was all in the Big Bang. And so was all the energy in my body as well, and everyone's body. Everything you touch was once, a long, long time ago, 14 billion years ago, in the Big Bang. And since all energy is conscious, the Big Bang was also a conscious experience. So all of the energy within my body and all of the energy within your body shared in that conscious experience, went through that conscious experience, whatever it was, and evolved out of that conscious experience. So I find that quite interesting and philosophically pregnant, that, pregnant with meaning, that all of us shared, all of the energy making all of us shared in one conscious experience at the very start of the universe. I personally find that quite amazing, and we all evolved out of that first physical and conscious state that we call the Big Bang. Now, as I say, we don't yet know what that conscious state was like. Maybe it was bliss, was one possible idea. Who knows? And, since then, the universe has been looking for different forms of bliss or pleasure, which a lot of life is trying to find pleasure and happiness. But anyway, that's for the future of the physics of consciousness. Okay, so in the old picture, dead universe, unconnected, your consciousness is an accident. the new picture, an alive universe that you're intimately connected with, form particles out of itself. Once the universe forms particles out of itself, it's capable of forming brains. Stars are very likely to be very immense brains. These could form, then connected stars could form even more immense brains, which allow for unthinkably immense intelligence that has guided the evolution of the universe to facilitate the evolution of creatures such as ourselves, with some sort of intelligent planning and purpose, such that human life is actually something, a learning process. So this allows for much more meaning to your life if you understand that your suffering, the hardships involved in being a human, and being a human is, let's get real, being a human is difficult, it's hard. If you come into existence and then you just die and then you're just gone eternally, you don't exist ever again, and you live a life that's dominated by suffering, that's kind of just torturous. That means that your existence is hell, basically. You were born, and then your life is dominated by suffering, and then you die for eternity. And your only experience of existing was dominated by suffering. But, it can't get much worse than that. One way to stop being an atheist is to acknowledge how absurdly awful it is. It's so incredibly bad that it just becomes absurd. Why would the universe torture such small aspects of itself? Anyway, it just couldn't possibly be worse. Atheism just couldn't, just as a matter of fact, it's the only belief system people have that they can believe in, but just really wish wasn't true. But yeah, if the whole universe is conscious, then it allows for all kinds of different brains and intelligence. And then there's some purpose to life, some purpose to, what does the universe do in its spare time? It creates creatures like humans out of itself because it finds it rewarding, the same way we find having children rewarding. And it's designed human life to be educational. So you can look at humans, we are getting more and more intelligent and we're getting more and more civilized, but we have to learn all of that through experience. And if we have souls within ourselves that survive death and take on new bodies, then your life at the moment and any suffering involved is all part of a larger learning experience that facilitates evolution. Okay, so then life becomes purposeful. You're here to learn. In particular, you're here to learn how to be a better being, a more moral being. If the universe at large is intelligent, we can also safely assume that it's a moral entity, that it has some idea, like we do as humans. We have some idea of right and wrong, good and bad, and how we should be and how we should try and be in the future. If we came up with these ideas, and all we are constructions of energy and particles, then other constructions of energy and particles, stars, cosmic brains, could come up with these ideas as well. And our experience of life could be a learning experience, how to become better beings in all different ways, physically better beings and also morally better beings in our pursuit of happiness. So life becomes purposeful, or possibly purposeful. And then the final contrast is eternal nothingness with the idea that humans possess a physical soul made out of physical particles. And remember, science has shown that the particles of our universe are capable of wave-particle duality. That means they can behave like particles, but then they can just become waves as well and travel as waves. So it's very possible, and I believe, that we possess physical souls that inhabit, are connected to, physically connected to our central nervous systems, exist within our central nervous systems, and that they make the quantum decisions of our body, not all of them. Like they don't, we don't usually control our heart beating or our breathing, but we control our movement, and we control what we do with our body, and we control our brains, the thoughts that we think. You can control what you imagine. For example, I can say, oh, imagine an object now, and you can imagine whatever, a football or a tree or whatever you want. So you control your imagination, for example. And I'm suggesting to you that there's a physical soul within you made out of energy and particles that controls your body, or most of the functions of your body. And for instance, like your body can take over control of certain aspects of your functioning, such as your breathing. Normally you don't have to be conscious of your breathing, but then you can, if you want, hold your breath or slow down your breathing, and you can take conscious control of your breathing. And that's your soul taking conscious control over your body. So your body is kind of like an Iron Man suit, where Iron Man is inside his Iron Man suit. We've all seen those movies, and he has control over the suit, but the suit can also has different functions that it can do things on behalf of Iron Man. And your body is like a piece of naturally evolving technology, like an Iron Man suit that contains your soul. And your soul has evolved within bodies, and it's been what's the word? Your souls are intimate. The evolution of the soul is intimately related to the evolution of the body. But anyway, at the point of death, your physical soul takes on waveform, physically disconnects from your body, and well, we'll have to in a later lecture. I'll explain models of the human soul. But a human soul, some continued existence, and if the whole universe is alive and conscious, it makes such ideas very, very plausible. So that's a contrast of the old picture with the new picture. The old picture is an absolute disaster. It's depressing. In my opinion, it's why the whole world is so depressed and scared and insecure at the moment. I think humans can't psychologically reconcile themselves with atheism and eternal non-existence. But the new picture is much more hopeful, much more meaningful, and much less absurd. Much less absurd. Because it really is unfortunate if we are just an accident that came into existence for a moment or two to just get a taste of existence, love and happiness, and then to be killed for eternity. That's pretty bad. Compared to the idea that the universe is a conscious entity that is evolving more and more complex forms out of itself, and the universe is this eternal conscious energy that is seeking the most meaningful way to evolve into the future. And part of its search for meaning has involved the evolution of creatures such as humans that themselves, in their own way, are searching for meaning as well, which is why you want your life to be meaningful. Because the whole universe wants existence to be meaningful. Because the whole universe is conscious and is obviously searching for the most conscious, the most pleasant way of existing. Okay, that's enough now. That's the old picture versus the new picture. And the new picture is much more hopeful, which is why I called it A New Picture, New Hope. So in the next lecture, lecture 4, that is entitled The Mind of God, we will examine the possibilities of making scientific models of the mind of the universe as a whole, that make the idea of God plausible. Now God isn't a man in a toga in the clouds. Now God is just the natural intelligence and evolving intelligence of the universe itself. So at the start of the universe, according to my theory, there was no God. Just like humans, or on Earth, there was no intelligence. There was no animal intelligence on Earth at one point. The animal intelligence had to evolve out of the basic stuff of the Earth with the influence of the sun. There was no animal life on Earth, but then the sun shining on the Earth created more and more complex forms out of the Earth, and these forms became more and more complex. And that's quite similar, and more intelligent. And that's quite similar to my theory of God, where there was the Big Bang and all the energy was in one very simple state. It was in one totally homogeneous state, zero intelligence, zero complexity. So at that point, there was no intelligence. There was just conscious energy. But then the conscious energy created particles out of itself and molecules and things like that and stars. And through experience, the universe became intelligent over billions of years. And then this intelligence would become very, very immense given the size of the universe, the size of the possible brains would be so extreme, so immense as to be essentially infinite intelligence from a human perspective. And this intelligence guided the physical evolution of the universe to facilitate the evolution of humans. So this is a model of God where, and there are many possible models of God, but this is a model of God where, and you can see it's totally scientific. This is a sketch of a model of God where God actually evolved through experience. God wasn't, the universe just, the Big Bang happened, we have to accept the Big Bang happened, and then God evolved out of that energy. Maybe it took, 1 billion years or 5 billion years. And then once this immense intelligence had come about through experience, it started to, like humans, we exist and we try and entertain ourselves and try and find meaningful ways of expressing ourselves creatively. And the existence of humans and animal life and the natural world on Earth is part of the universe expressing itself creatively. Okay, so that's what we'll talk about in the next lecture, which is called The Mind of God. Okay, thanks for listening. All the best.